My last year and a half was as an instructor in VF-124, which was the replacement air group training squadron for the pilots that had just completed their basic training and advanced training, and then were qualifying to join the carriers in the fleet.
And is that a picture of
the aircraft that I flew and instructed in was the Chance Vought Crusader, the F-8U. So this particular aircraft was very unusual because it had a wing that was able to be raised and lowered 7 degrees, which increased the visibility for the pilot and allowed him to fly slower for takeoff and landings. It was a single-seat, single-engine, high-performance airplane. One version of it that I flew, I took it to 62,000 feet and went about Mach 2, which is approximately 1,600 miles an hour.
Wow.
It's the last aircraft that had internal Gatling guns for firepower. Of course, after this aircraft, they went to missiles. And this aircraft was capable of carrying missiles, but it also had the capability to dogfight, which the current fighters do not have because they don't have internal guns.
And so you actually took off. Now you were in the Navy, is that correct?
That's correct.
You were a Navy jet fighter pilot.
Right.
And so were you? What was it like taking off of aircraft carriers?
It's hard to describe because the G-forces are tremendous on takeoff. On the launch itself, the steam catapult in about 200 feet, you go from 0 to 140 miles an hour, 150 miles an hour. So it's a tremendous acceleration force, and the same when you come into land. The wires that are stretched across the back of the deck, which stop you with the tail hook, is a pretty good force and puts some real strain on your shoulders from the shoulder straps as you decelerate.
Wow. How about how many pilots would there be on a typical
80 or 90, depending on the size of the ship. The ship that I was on was, of course, that was 40 years ago, and they were quite a bit smaller.
What was the name of that ship?
That was the Bonhomme Richard, CVA 31. It's no longer in existence because it was an old carrier. And now they have the nuclear carriers, which are much, much larger than the one that we flew off of.
And what part of the world was the carrier located when you?
Well, we were based at San Diego, and we made several cruises to the Far East, Hong Kong, Singapore. We made one trip to the Indian Ocean, where we had the Shah of Iran on board for a flight demonstration, and we went to Madagascar. On the carrier, so it was a terrific life.
It seems like a terrifically frightening.
No, it wasn't. No, I mean it got your adrenaline going, but certainly at times. But we were very, very well trained, so it was not frightening at all.
Did you ever have any frightening experiences?
Oh yeah, I did. In basic training, flying the T-28, we were doing air-to-air gunnery, and I got what they call target fixation, and I flew into the banner and put a nice big hole in the wing. And I thought that was going to end my Navy career as I was still in the basic part of the training. But it didn't, and I later went on to set a record for 30,000-foot gunnery, where you actually fire when you're supersonic at about Mach 1.2.
Wow.
So I redeemed myself, we could say.
And wasn't there an incident where you had a rare, almost catastrophic accident on a landing situation?
Yeah, we had just left Hong Kong in October of 1962 because there was a typhoon coming in, and the captain of the ship on the second day out at sea decided to run flight ops, although the weather was very, very rough. And on my first approach and landing, the ship rolled just as I touched down, and all the weight went on the left main gear. So the wheel broke off, and the strut was still remaining with the aircraft, but the wheel was gone. So they had me go up and dump as much fuel as I could and burn up as much fuel.
So you just had one gear,
wheel.
or one wheel.
One main wheel and one nose wheel.
I see. And
Yeah.
so you're missing one total wheel to land on.
That's right.
There's no way to come in equal in that situation. I mean, and have two symmetrical wheels landing. You were.
Well, it's a wooden deck. Actually, I would have come in as I normally would. It would be just, I wouldn't fly it any differently than I normally would. But because of the wooden deck, they were concerned that the strut without a wheel would dig into that wooden deck and cause the airplane to spin. So they rigged what they call a barricade, which is a big nylon strap webbing device that they raise up, and they can trap an aircraft with it. And I flew into that. Unfortunately, it didn't work properly. It didn't release when it was supposed to, and I went off the angled deck into the water.
You and the plane went right into the ocean.
Yes, I was still in the aircraft, and I had about 100 knots of airspeed as I left the angled deck, so I had enough airspeed to keep the nose up, but not enough to regain flight, so it just crashed into the water.
I mean, did you kind of splash across the water, or
No, I don't think so.
did you just
I
go
don't know.
straight down?
I'm not aware of what might have happened. I think it just splashed and didn't skip at all. It just splashed into the water, and that was it. The cockpit broke off and floated behind the main section of the fuselage. The wing broke off, so the aircraft was in three pieces. I was sitting in the cockpit with my straps connected, and the canopy was gone. I don't know how that was removed, and I decided to climb out. Unfortunately,
I mean, you were underwater at the time?
no,
or?
I was sitting on top of the water.
Okay.
So I just decided to unstrap and climb out. Well, I undid the top two harness connections. Unfortunately, the aircraft, the cockpit rolled over and sank about that time, and I was going down.
With you in the cockpit?
With me in the cockpit. So I held my mask up to my face because one of the fittings had broken. So I held it up to my face so I could continue breathing from the oxygen in the aircraft, and was fighting with one hand, trying to release the other two fittings that kept me strapped into the aircraft. And when I finally got those undone, I realized that my left foot was jammed in the probably under the rudder pedal in the wreckage of the aircraft.
Due to the wreckage was actually impinged on your foot.
Yeah. So
you're underwater. I mean, do you think you're like 30 feet deep or 50 feet deep?
They estimated I got down to about 40 feet before I got out.
Well, what'd you do with your foot? You're trapped. You know, you're full of. I mean, it's all water, right? You don't have any oxygen. You have the mask on.
I have the mask on, holding the mask to my face, and I am breathing oxygen. Yes. So I'm fine going down until I realized my foot was stuck, and then I actually considered the possibility of having to cut it off with my survival knife. But I stood up on the seat and just hoisted myself, pushed as hard as I could with my right foot and leg, and my foot broke loose.
You considered chopping your foot off?
Yes, I read a story about a guy that was a logger, and he was in the woods by himself, and he felled a tree, and it trapped him, and so he cut his leg off with his